Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome into episode 159 here of the Canucks Speakeasy podcast. My name is Pete.
My name is Doug.
And I'm Brendan, aka J-Bo.
We got a 4-game flight after taking a week off here. So, Doug, why don't you start us off here?
The Canucks played the Dallas Stars and came away with a 4-3 loss in overtime. Teddy Bluger had 2 assists in this game. Connor Garland had a goal and assist, as did Dakota Joshua. The third line kept being the Canucks' best line.
And then right prior to Christmas, the Canucks beat San Jose 7-4. Andre Kuzmenko with an impressive return to the lineup with a couple of goals. The third line continues to roll. Dakota Joshua with a goal. Pius Suter with a goal. Neo Zomai. So it's one of those games where all the lines chipped in and had a say in who won that game. They made it a little closer than they should have against a bad Sharks team, but we'll cut them some slack the last game before Christmas.
Coming out of the break, I, for some reason, agreed to take this game. The Canucks laid a bit of an egg against the Flyers, or maybe the Flyers are good. I don't know. But again, it was that third line for the Canucks, Teddy Bluger with the goal. Flyers scored 3 quick ones in the second. Canucks never really recovered. 4-1 Flyers to end a streak of getting points in, I believe it was 9 consecutive games.
The Canucks' first game of 2024 was against the Ottawa Senators. Wayne Gretzky was in attendance along with Chad Kroger of Nickelback.
Wow.
But you're here to know what the score was. And the score was 6-3 for the Canucks. It was a 5-goal first period. The Canucks kind of sat back on their heels after that 5-goal outburst. Ottawa made it somewhat close, but the Canucks, like I said, came away with a 6-3 victory. Pius Suter had 2 goals and an assist. Elias Pettersson also had 2 goals, and JT Miller a goal and an assist.
And I was almost waiting for the Canucks to stop practice and have a ceremony for Wayne Gretzky, or stop the game and have a ceremony. It's just there's so much Gretzky hype around him being there. Talkett's old buddy Wayner in the house. I mean, every time he's around the Canucks, something seems to happen for him.
I was making a joke saying he's probably come to town to get some odds on some NFL playoff games, because we know, Talkett and Gretzky, or Paulina Gretzky all those years ago, made some Super Bowl bets that were whatever. But no, I thought it was cool seeing Wayne in attendance. I don't know.
There's some funny shots circulating out there. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, hey, it's the great one, and he was in Vancouver, and I mean, he's been a fan of this group, and has had a lot of good things to say. And it was, it wasn't a 60-minute performance. Hell, I don't even think it was a 40-minute performance. But
it was an 18-minute performance.
Yeah, it was one of those games where you're like, and yeah, I was frustrated because I thought, some areas of their game, in the last 2 periods, especially, I'm of the belief that if you have a lead, and especially a big lead, that the only team that should be getting odd man rushes should be you. That you have no reason to be giving up odd man rushes, but they did, and it was really the only 2 goals Ottawa scored were off of odd man rushes, off of poor pinches, poor rotation. I'd have to go back and look and see what specifically it was, but I mean, the one goal where Hughes was basically down below the goal, or near down the goal line for a while, and then kind of stayed up near the circle and never got back into position, and they go back, and Ottawa goes down and scores. And it's just, I thought, geez, like, you don't need to do that. If you just stay structurally sound, especially with the way Ottawa was playing last night, if you just stay structurally sound, play well defensively, at some point Ottawa's going to gift you opportunities like they did in the first period. And just the Canucks decided that they were going to try to force opportunities, which was an area of the way they used to play in the past that always frustrated me, where they seem to force the issue rather than just let the game come to them with the lead. And it's something they've been much better with this year. And I'm sure, you go up 5-0. So, and things get a little more lax than they might be if it was like a 1 or a 2 goal lead. So, I'll tend to give them a pass, and hopefully on this road trip, which is going to be a tough one, it's not something that rears its ugly head at any point over the next 7 games.
Well, and yeah, at least it's a win is a win. It's nice to at least win these games. These are games in the last few years we wouldn't have lost. So for us fans to be griping about a win, there was a lot, and I was one of them too because I thought it was a pretty sloppy win, but we still won the game. And this is maybe the sign of a good team. You win games when you play sloppy, and these are these are the type of games that we wouldn't have won in previous years. We're going to get into a lot of Canucks stuff, some junior stuff as well on this episode. You can also follow us online on Twitter. I'm Pete_Gas. The podcast is at Canucks Speak.
You can follow me on Twitter at Doug Venn. And be sure to check out the playlist on Spotify and Apple Music. It's the Canucks Speakeasy outro playlist.
And I'm at Jabo_Vancouver, JABO_Vancouver, not to be confused with not _Jabo_Vancouver, which, hey, if you're out there and you're listening, I'm flattered that you decided to make
You've made it, buddy. You've
parody
made
account with me. But yeah, find something better to do with your life. I'm not that important. And you can follow us on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button. So please do that because we deserve it.
Yeah, you've made it now, man. If it's like I had a pizza named after me at work, you've got an account that's a parody of you. Like, geez,
I would much rather have a pizza made after me than have a parody. Like, if having a parody account means I made it, I would rather not make it.
That's the world we live in, man. You got to deal with all this incredible fame that comes with Twitter and this podcast. Guys, before we do get into all that, almost forgot, it is the end of the month happened. We got the 3 stars of the month. Doug, again, why don't you start us off with your 3 stars for the month of December 2023?
Sure. Well, one player who didn't only play 20 minutes of solid hockey last night. He played a full 60 minutes of hockey. My 3rd star for the month of December, even though last night's game wasn't in December, it was in January. And that's Thatcher Demko. Demko played 8 games and he went 6-1-1 with a 2.98 goals against average. He was under a 9 save percentage with an 0.897 save percentage, but Thatcher Demko would be my 3rd star for the month of December. Star number 2, Teddy Blueger. I mean, 12 games played, 11 points, 4 goals, 7 assists. Blueger has been the engine that really, that entire third line has been incredible. And December was definitely that line's month. And Blueger, to me, was the shining star. Even though all 3 of those players were only separated by 2 points for the entire month, Blueger's my 2nd star. And 1st star for the month of December, I'm giving it to Brock Boeser. Boeser had 7 goals, 4 assists in 12 games played. Boeser's goal totals, he's still not slowing down whatsoever in his goal totals. So yeah, for me, it's Boeser 1, Blueger 2, Demko 3.
All right, man. This is a fun month. Like, there was a lot of guys I was looking at, and I think we're gonna have. I'm curious to hear Brendan's list after this as well. 3rd star for the month is the guy you just mentioned, Brock Boeser. Led the team in goals for the month with 7, and he's not slowing down. And that's something that I think a lot of us thought would maybe happen. He's not just producing on the power play. 6 of his goals this month were at even strength. It's great to see what Brock is doing out there, not slowing down. 11 points in 12 games. Number 2 for me is also Teddy Blueger. I mean, this third line has been our best line over the last stretch of hockey, and he had 11 points in 12 games for the month. He is riding like a 9 or 10 game point streak. What a revelation he's been, and has really given us some depth down the middle, especially with the return of Pius Suter. Suter is all of a sudden now in a 4th line role and also playing fantastic, and the Canucks are very solid up the middle. Teddy Blueger in between Joshua and Garland, who I got to give honorable mentions to. Number 1 for me, I got to give it to Quinn Hughes, just because of not just his numbers, but what I watched from him this month. He just continues to be Quinn Hughes. Even the games where he's quiet, he's still doing stuff. He's still making these sharp passes, these outlets. He's getting it out. He's not making a lot of bad turnovers. He's had a couple here and there, but nothing that I'd really worry too much about. Leads the team in ice time, getting a ton of power play time, 12 points in 12 games. I got to give it to who guy who's likely, in my opinion, going to be the Canuck who is added to the All-Star lineup before the fan voting. Brendan, who you have?
All right, number 3, just like Doug, Thatcher Demko. I mean, I think it's hard not to have Thatcher Demko on the list just because of what he means to this team. Both him and Casey DeSmith as well. Honorable mention to Casey DeSmith as well, who's been fantastic. But you need those linchpins in net, and I believe at one point in the last month, Thatcher Demko was named a second star of the week, and really has been fantastic. Second star, I'm going all third line, because I think, above anything else, that third line seems to have gotten what Rick Tocchet wants, as well as anybody. So my second star, Dakota Joshua, not just because what he's done on that third line, but also as a penalty killer as well. Having him kind of sort of take on that role, it really has allowed for them to not have to use Pettersson and JT Miller to the extent that they were in the past. And really, if you see, you're seeing Teddy Bluger take a lot of those starts when the PK begins, and he's winning draws as well, which is important. And that's why he's my number 1 star. I just think those two. Obviously, I feel bad leaving out Connor Garland, because I think he's probably 5-on-5 been the best player on that line. But just with those two, Bluger and Dakota Joshua have meant not just to that line with the goals that they've been scoring, the offense they've been producing, but also 5-on-5, or I'm sorry, PK as well, which it's going to be as important as this second half rolls along, and definitely on this 7-game road trip, it's important that PK does well. I remember there was the overtime where Rick Tocchet put Dakota Joshua on the ice in Dallas, and I mean, he almost single-handedly won that game in overtime, and probably should have, because he was the only reason why they created that 2-on-0, and it just was an unfortunate thing that 2-on-0, you had a dead tired Elias Pettersson, and I think in the evolution of Dakota Joshua, you hope in the future that what he does is that he realizes, hey, I mean, as good as Elias Pettersson is, I'm good too, and I can take this, and I can have that amount of confidence that I can take this puck and win this game, because I really think that he probably should have been the one just to go in on a solo breakaway with Pettersson being as tired as he was. So yeah, those are my 3 stars.
Nice. It's interesting. None of us had Miller or Pettersson in there, and it's not that they played bad. They were both point a game. Pettersson actually led the team in scoring for the month of December, and none of us put him on there.
It's not it's obviously it's not a slight on either.
Not at all.
At all.
It's a good thing.
Yeah,
it's good in my opinion. It's nice to this is nice to have that, and I mean, to have Teddy Bluger get on all 3 of ours. It was impossible not to put Teddy Bluger on as one of the stars of the month. I'm glad you gave Joshua the nod. I really looked hard at him. Yeah. I really wanted to get Besser in there. And again, I'm just continuously impressed by Hughes, but Hughes could have honestly, in a lot of ways, been interchanged with some other guys as well on there. It was a pretty solid month overall, so it's really nice to see. I guess we had like 6 different Canucks in there, which is that's going to be fun for the stats, which we got to tally. I don't have them handy, but next time we do this, we'll have the updated list of where everyone is standing in the Golden Barfly award for the Canucks Speakeasy. Guys, I know we heard you touched on the 7-game road trip, but I kind of want to start with the juniors a bit today before we get into the Canucks and what's coming up here and what's going on, because this road trip's going to be massive. But Brendan, for those of you guys out there, guys and gals watching on YouTube, got a lovely Swedish player back there. And before we get into the Canucks prospects, I just want to talk a little bit about the juniors, because what I've noticed, and I've tweeted a bit about this, there seems to be a different kind of feel about the juniors this year among Canadians. I don't know if it's just that, there's no Russia, the early starts, although we've had early games in early tournaments before, the lack of high-end talent on Team Canada. I don't know what it is, but a lot of people, just myself included, were not invested in Canada at all this year. I hardly watched any. I've watched more Sweden than Canada. And I said going into this tournament, I was going to be more interested in Sweden because of the Canucks, but I thought at first this was a Vancouver thing, but I've talked to friends in other cities and other markets. This seems to be larger than just a Vancouver thing. This seems to be a fairly cross Canada thing. And it's not everybody. There are still people who are quite into it, but most hockey fans I talk to, and most of my buddies who are hockey fans cheering for Jets, Flames, Habs, Leafs, whoever else, they're kind of in the same boat. So I'd just love to hear what you guys kind of thought about the juniors and where you kind of maybe stand right now with Team Canada.
Well, I'll be completely honest. I've never really been a fan of the tournament. I've always thought the World Juniors was completely a manufactured and overblown tournament. I've always thought that. I think for a lot of people, with what's happened with Hockey Canada over the past few years, that has
Yeah,
definitely left a
definitely.
sour taste. And for me, it's only um just further cemented the idea in my mind that this was a completely overblown tournament that gave prominence to kids that were way too young. And we've seen it, whether when they win, the adulation they've gotten, and when they lose, the vitriol that they get for some people. I mean, I look at guys that are like men that are 40 and 50 years old that are piling on kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old, and I'm like, fucking get a life. Like, seriously, get
Yeah,
a life. These are children. These are literally children that don't have and I'm sorry for people who seem to think that professional athletes and young athletes at that age are somehow more mature and able to handle this more than other 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. Fuck off. There's no way. A 16, 17, and 18-year-old are a 16, they're teenagers. They're children. They don't have the emotional maturity to be able to handle that. And what happens? You got stuff, we all know the rumors and the things that have come out over the past few years involving some of the teams and without going into it because we all know what it is. So, my apathy and towards Canada goes back a long time. Canada's the best, is the greatest hockey power in the world. Obviously, there are countries that are coming along that are rivaling us, but you still expect Canada to win these tournaments. So, I don't. It's hard for me to get invested in something. I'd much rather get invested in sports where Canada isn't a dominant power. Like I love tennis, I love golf, I love when Canadians do well in track and field or swimming and sports that we're not necessarily known for. Hockey, just for me, yeah, I'll cheer for Canada at the Olympic level when we've got our best on best because I just think it's fun. But for stuff like this, I just think this was manufactured and now it's just become a monstrosity. And I think people have, over the last couple of years, have kind of caught on that it's just, it doesn't need to be this big.
Yeah, look, look first. I think the Hockey Canada controversy is one of the biggest reasons why I think a lot of Canadians aren't as emotionally invested in the World Juniors as they used to be. And look, to be fair, none of the players that have played for Team Canada the last handful of years were involved in that controversy. But the fact that Team Canada hasn't seem to have any responsibility or have had to be like had their feet held to the fire for covering up, essentially sexual assault. I think that leaves a lot of bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. I also think, like I think you said this earlier, Pete, there wasn't really any like elite generational talent, not just on Team Canada, but I think in this tournament as a whole, right? Last year we had Bedard. Bedard had an incredible World Juniors, and yes, I agree. I mean, the likes of Artem Chubarov being overblown because of this tournament, or Canuck legend Jordan Schrader being overblown because
yeah,
of this tournament. Like so many of these guys, year after year, the hype around them gets blown out of proportion because of this tournament. I've always been a TSN guy. I've always preferred TSN to Sportsnet, but obviously TSN losing, the rights to the NHL, this has kind of become their bread and butter. And the fact that it's just after Christmas, Boxing Day, it's kind of like this family affair. You get the family together, you watch the World Junior Tournament. But all that being said, yeah, like I haven't really been invested in Team Canada for years. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Canucks don't have any players. The last significant, and I really use the quotation significant Canadian player to play for Team Canada at the World Juniors that was a Canuck was Jake Virtanen. and he had a disastrous tournament, right? I mean, he was one of the older players. I think he was a returning player, and he had that awful giveaway. And yeah, so I think a lot of these players either are overhyped or undervalued by the outcome of this tournament. And yes, obviously when a McDavid, or you see the likes of a Sidney Crosby, or I think back to that, was it Jonathan Toews and Jack Johnson, the defenseman, where they were going, it was in Vancouver too, in the shootout back and forth. You know what I mean? Because the cool thing with international hockey, you can have the same guy take the shootout over and over and over again, the penalty shot when it comes to the shootout. So that's cool. But I agree. Like, I haven't really wanted Team Canada, or I haven't been overly cheering for Team Canada for a number of years yet now. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Brendan. I prefer when Canada is an underdog. Yes, the Olympics, when it's best on best, that's a completely different element than the World Juniors. But a lot of these kids on these, it means so much more. Not that it doesn't mean a lot to these Canadian kids, but you just see, like, when Finland finally won their gold medal at the World Juniors, how much it meant to those kids, right? To finally get over the hump and win the gold medal. Canada, I think, has won, like, what is it, like 6 of the last 8 gold medals in the tournament. It loses its luster unless you got a player like McDavid or Bedard, pardon me, playing for Team Canada.
Yeah, I'm with you guys as well about like pro tournaments. I'll always, like, the Olympics, the men's and the women's teams. Like, I'll 100% cheer for the Canadian men and women in those tournaments. And the World Cup of soccer, of course, I was cheering for Canada, and they're an underdog in their group. And I do like those underdog stories. Pro tournaments are a different story. I look at the juniors over the last few years as more of a showcase for prospects, but I do believe that we have put this unfair amount of pressure. And I know you're a TSN guy, Doug, and I know why TSN does this, but TSN is the real driving factor for a lot of this pressure that gets put on it. And I just think it has become blown because it is teenagers. And I just think this is one of these things where maybe a lot of it is just catching it up. And maybe we've seen this before. Someone's pager is going off there. And
not mine.
I don't know. I don't know if it's the lack of if it's all these combinations. 2018 though, and the cover up is a huge part of it all.
Yeah.
But again, I look at this now as more of a showcase for the tournament. Jonah Gadjevich was another Team Canada guy for when he was with the Canucks, wasn't he? I mean, not significant.
He'd be the last guy. He'd be the last guy I remember on Team Canada.
I think so. Like, there's just never a lot of Canadians. You usually get like Finns or Czechs, and this year it's the Swedes.
Americans.
And yeah, Americans too. And even the Canucks, one of the Canucks' top prospects didn't make the team because he's playing in the CHL right now, Hunter B. But for me this year, I knew going into the tournament, I was more interested in Sweden than Team Canada. And with that, well, let's talk about these Swedish kids. The 3 Canucks playing for Team Sweden have all had fantastic tournaments so far from what I've seen. And I have actually watched the Sweden games, and when I'm watching them, I'm hyper focused on those 3 guys. Like Harry Mackey, guy can snipe, man. He's got a shot. I know we've been seeing it in the SHL this year, but he can actually now seeing it in this stage when he's playing against guys his same age, what he can do with it as well. Incredible. Very impressive. Elias Pettersson, the other one, didn't realize just quite how physical the guy is. The guy has got a real shot at becoming a good second or third kind of role defenseman, I think, just from what we've seen. And of course, Tom Willander I think he looks fantastic. The guy seems to have a very high hockey IQ and seems to do, without doing anything exceptionally, he kind of does everything well. He's kind of like a bit of a Swiss Army knife or Swedish Army knife, I guess, of kind of do a little bit of everything. And just kind of curious, you guys, thoughts on what you've seen from the 3 Canucks on Team Sweden so far.
Well, I mean, I should preface this by saying I think we tend to read a little bit too much. I mean, again, this is just a very short tournament, and you got guys that don't play together very often. So it's very easy to either over or
come on, just humor me, Brandon. Just humor me.
All right.
Come on.
Well, first of all, what I like is that Sweden, who is who has a lot of offensive talent. They do play a more of a structured defensive game, which I like because it's something that these players need to learn. I mean, Sweden shuts out Team Canada, which obviously this Canadian team wasn't as touted as some we've seen in the past, but still shutting out a Canadian team is no small accomplishment. And that's what I like. Certainly you look at Lekaramaki and he's got the shot. I mean, and that shot's ridiculous. And the release on it, it's just so quick and so on point. It's really hard to teach that because I mean, let's be honest, not many young players have that. But what I like it is that he has a more of a well-rounded game than you might have thought. He's not lacking in his own end. He is good in his own end. He knows where he's supposed to be, and he's a good defensive forward to complement what he brings offensively. And he's showed those flashes of dynamic play, that we've seen in the SHL. So, what I like about all three of them is just that well-roundedness to their game and the fact that they are good defensively, so that when they do come to Abbotsford, and certainly there's going to be a learning curve, and no one should expect that there shouldn't be. No one should expect Lekaramaki to be on the Canucks at the beginning of next year. I think that's unrealistic. That I know the expectation is for him to come over here when his season's done in the SHL and play for Abbotsford down the stretch and hopefully in the playoffs. But that's not going to be enough, or at least I wouldn't think that's going to be enough for him. No matter what he does in training camp next year, the expectation should be from all fans that he's going to spend, at least half a season, if not a full season, in the AHL, sort of along the lines of what we've seen with Höglander and now with Podkolzin, which I'm expecting Podkolzin to be there for the entire season. And to me, it's important, not just for these players, but for this organization to set that precedent, that this is what we're going to do. And we don't just do it with, third and fourth rounders. We do it with our best players. You're going to come to Abbotsford. You're going to learn the way we play, and you're going to learn to play it consistently. And then you'll come to Vancouver. But I mean, again, like I said, I like what I've seen. These guys show a very well-rounded game and show that hopefully by the time they do get to Abbotsford, the learning curve defensively won't be as big as for some guys that we've seen come out of the SHL the CHL, where defensive hockey, isn't for some teams as important as, you'd might like it to be. So I'm happy. I'm not overblowing it. I'm not underblowing it. I don't think that's a word, but I like what I see so far.
And you're not blowing it. So
I'm not. What?
Yeah.
No. Look, I agree. Like, I think expectations of these three players, they're not going to be in a Canuck lineup for at least 2 years. Any of them, I don't think. Right? I don't think any of them are going to make the squad next year. Patrick Alvin was interviewed. He was over there watching the tournament in person. He was interviewed via a Swedish media. I'm not sure what outlet it was. And he said, Tom Willander, the plan is for him to do another year in Boston University, to get Elias Pettersson over here at the end of his
solid pronunciation year.
Yeah,
solid
no
pronunciation.
That's twice. That's twice he's done that now.
Thank you. And then Jonathan Lekaramaki, I think the plan is to get him.
I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it, but I mean, I'm gonna
just go with it. Just go with it.
You have me fooled, man.
And I think the plan is to hopefully get him over at the end of his season to get some games in with Abbotsford. I think for the two, DPD and Lekaramaki, the adjustment to the smaller ice is going to be something they're going to need to have deal with. That's the one thing I really liked about the Tom Willander pick this past year, was the fact that he was going to NCAA, playing in the NCAA. You never see that from a Swedish player or any European player, generally speaking. So I thought that was really an interesting development choice for him to get used to that North American ice size a little quicker. But yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great that, three Canuck players, regardless that they're all on Team Sweden, are having an impact like they are at the World Juniors. And I know the previous 10 minutes before we got to these players, we talked about how overblown and overhyped this tournament is. However, I don't remember the last time there was multiple Canuck players contributing at the level that these three guys are. and they're contributing at all levels, defensively, offensively. Elias
Physically.
Pettersson's on the third physically. Exactly. He's on their quote unquote third pair, but he's still leading the Swedish team in minutes time on ice, like even as the third pairing defenseman. Tom Wielander had that great goal. I think it was against Canada, wasn't it? It was just an amazing goal. So yeah, the future is bright. And, I think you mentioned it, Pete, about Hunter Perskevich not making the American team, but, he's having a lights out year as well. And last year, Lekaramaki, he had a really bad D+1 year. And I think a lot of Canuck fans, myself included, were a little bit worried about his development and whether or not he was going to, even get a sniff in the NHL. And he's really turned it around this year. Hey, good. No. And what's funny is I heard a stat where, because this is his third World Juniors, Jonathan Lekaramaki, because they had that weird one last summer. Because remember the previous December it was canceled, so you had one in, I think it was July, and then they had the obviously the one last Boxing Day. So this is his third World Junior, and he's really dominating this time around. A guy who the Canucks were also interested in during that draft, Liam Ogren. This is his third World Junior appearance as well. Do you know how many goals Liam Ogren has in those 3 appearances? 2. In 3 appearances. 2.
Wow.
That's it. So, and again, not saying he's going to be a bust or anything like that. But it just goes to show that Lekaramaki has taken his game to that next level. And I believe he's tied for the tournament lead in goals, at least up until Sweden's last game against Switzerland. And yeah, man, it's just good to see these players developing, Canuck players developing.
It's definitely fun to see. And of course, it's all on Team Sweden. It's like, I talk to my buddies who are kind of, not Canucks fans, or casually following it. Oh, where are your prospects? Sweden, all of them? Yep, they're all on Sweden. And also Doug, I think Doug took offense to me always calling us the podcast that mispronounces player names, because he even got Hunter B right in there. Like, you're killing it today. Doug's
my New Year's resolution, guys.
Yeah,
my New Year's
man.
resolution.
You're well 3 days in, and you're killing it. I'm still calling him Hunter B. I gotta.
To be fair, I feel like you were always the guy. Well, you were the guy that always mispronounced the names. I'm the guy that always forgets the names.
Okay.
I just completely forget the name.
Yeah. Well, whatever it is, I haven't changed, and you've moved up a notch on the ladder here. Hey, guys, we got to actually switch to the big club here, though, because just looking at the time here. And we talked a little bit about what's been going on. Of course, some of the games we covered in our flight are quite a bit in the past now, because we didn't record last week. But we got this 7-game road trip coming up, and I think this is something when the schedule came out. I think we've talked about this before. It's just this was a bit of the schedule. I'm like, this is really going to be an important part of how the Canucks season goes. This is a brutal 7-game road trip. The first 5 games are all against teams that are currently above 500. The last 2 teams are below 500, but those are afternoon games. We know how that goes. Most of this tournament's in the East Coast. You got back-to-backs against the New York teams in there. It is a tough one. Do you guys have an idea, like what would be a successful record coming out of this trip? Like, I would be happy myself with them coming out with 7 points in the 7 games. Like, if they come out of here 3-3-1, I'd be okay with that. Is that enough, you guys think, considering that is below what the team has been doing and their pace this year? Do you guys want like a 4-2-1? Yeah, like 5-2? Like, what is kind of for you guys? You'd say is a successful road trip here?
No, I mean 7 points is fine. Again, it's like I always say, if you can hold serve on the road, especially on tough road trips, and then make hay at home, which this team has done, that's the way to go. And my hope is that, of course, you look at this road trip and you see the teams that they're playing and the travel and the amount of the space between games and all that. There's a lot. I want this team to embrace this challenge. This is, this is an opportunity that the core of this team has wanted for a few years now. That is to play meaningful games with an opportunity to solidify yourself in a playoff spot. And so that's the most important thing to me. Don't wilt under this. This isn't like, it's pressure, but this should be fun. This should be exactly what you want. And it's an opportunity to go back east and show the people back east, the kind of team that you think that you are and that you firmly believe that you are. And so that to me is the most important thing, to embrace this pressure, to enjoy this pressure. And I believe Talkett said it at the end of the game last night, that to enjoy this, because you're in a position at the top of the Pacific Division, which no one thought you were ever going to be anywhere near that, with a real chance to, get yourself in a position to, to enjoy the last couple of months as you try to jockey for position near the top of the Pacific Division. So yeah, I mean, 7 points would be fine. To me, it's more how they like. Again, it's been that way with me the entire time. It's more how they play. Just like the game against Ottawa last night. Yeah, they played a great first period, but I wasn't happy with the way they played the last two periods. I thought they were sloppy. I thought the parts of their game that had seemed to be figured out were kind of lapsed a little bit. And so here's a real opportunity to show the rest of the league, and especially those teams back east and those media bases back east that don't see this team very often, what you're made of. And I really hope they take this opportunity, enjoy it, and put their best foot forward.
Yeah, I agree. It's how they play these games. Like, even if they come away, with a sub 500 record in the 7-game road trip, as long as, the effort's there and, they're putting together as close to a 60-minute performance as possible, I think that's a win. I mean, obviously the two games that really stick out to me are New Jersey and the Rangers. Those are the two big games. They obviously have a back-to-back. They play the Rangers on Monday, the 8th of January, and then the very next night they're playing Horvat in Long Island against the Islanders. So, but it's the Devils game, especially since how they lost to the Devils last time they played, and then the Rangers, who are right up there as, one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the entire league. Those are the kind of two big litmus tests for me. The other thing too is, I think, not that this team doesn't have that team camaraderie, but just, going on the road is what really builds that team camaraderie. And I know the one thing Talking about this road trip, the one thing he was a little bit concerned about is just their lack of practice time they're going to get on this road trip. But, outside of that one back-to-back, I assume the Canucks are going to, they're going to have enough rest in between games where they shouldn't be too tired, especially because, you got 3 games in, the central New York State area, obviously, Rangers, Devils, Islanders. So there's not a ton of traveling going on there. Yes, they go down to Pittsburgh and they come back up to play in Buffalo. But, the Canucks, even though they're going out east, they're not doing a ton of traveling, which is good. They should be able to stay in the same hotel, for all 3 games against Jersey, Rangers, and Islanders, you would think. It's going to be a great test. I think this is one of the bigger tests for this team. And then even when they get home, the Coyotes, they're no walkover anymore. The Coyotes are playing great. And then obviously they got the Leafs right after that, which is always, a big game in Vancouver. And then immediately after that, you've got Connor Bedard's debut in Vancouver. So, I know we're talking about 7 games, but it's really the next 10 games that, the Canucks really need to kind of grind and, get their game to as close to a 60-minute performance as possible. I do wonder how many games on this road trip Casey DeSmith's going to start. I say he'll start
3.
2.
I say
You
3.
say 3? Okay.
Yeah.
Brendan?
2 for sure. With
Yeah.
and again, a lot of it will come down to how he plays. And it's something I said last night on Twitter, and I just want to say this quickly, that this is really the beginning of a 3-month stretch where you're going to get pretty much desperate teams every single night, whether it's teams trying to get back into the playoff discussion, or teams just like the Canucks who are trying to solidify themselves in a playoff spot. So you're going to get the best performance from every team, because whether they're in on the bubble or outside, like even a team like Ottawa last night. Now, granted, we didn't see their best, but you got every team right now feels whether that they either still have a chance, or they want to make sure that spot in the playoffs is going to be theirs in a couple of months. So you're going to get the best from all of these teams from here for the next couple of months. So, it's really the beginning of the stretch drive, which is really weird to say because we're not even at the halfway point. So, it's going to be a test for this group, and hopefully they're excited for it, because they should be.
Well, we passed the halfway mark on this road trip. That's another thing, is this road trip takes us over the halfway mark of the season. A couple things, just that, you mentioned the travel with this trip, and New York, like Jersey and Madison Square Garden in Brooklyn are not far from each other. My mom is from Long Island. We got family out that way, spent a lot of time out that way. It is not far between all those. If you stay in Manhattan, you can get to the other ones on a train in like 20
And
minutes,
my
half an hour.
and I've got 2 buddies that are going to all 3 games,
Yeah.
the one obviously the
Nice.
first one in Jersey and then the back to back. And yeah, they're staying in one hotel in Manhattan,
Yep.
and all they have to do is take a train to get to all 3. So
It's
it's yeah, so it's really in terms of travel, yeah, you're playing back to back nights is never easy, but you don't have to do any sort of travel. You could stay in one spot and play all 3 games.
No, and the other thing as well, so tomorrow they're in St. Louis Central Time Zone, and then I assume actually they're probably in St. Louis tonight, and then after that you're in the same time zone for the 6 games. So it will give yourself some time to acclimatize in the schedule. I mean, there's no easy games, but on paper the schedule is easier towards the end of the road trip as well. So nothing is a given in the NHL on any day, but those are just kind of a couple things I look at this. And then this is all offset in March when we have a 9-game homestand, which I don't ever remember the Canucks having. But it's this is another critical stretch, like you said, probably 10 games as well.
Yeah.
Well, guys, should we take this to the free pour? I take that as a yes.
All
Let's go.
Was I supposed to answer that question? I mean, I
I
probably
guess
did. Yeah.
I guess it was rhetorical. All right,
Yes.
Doug, you can take us into the free pour.
Yes. So I'm going to talk about a similar thing I did on the last free pour episode. And again, I'm highlighting another Vancouver Island distillery. And this one is actually in Victoria, Macaloni's. These guys are doing some absolutely amazing things with whiskey that is only aged 3, 4, maybe 5 years. Um, Sherry Bomb. This is the Caldera. I got this for Christmas. An absolute Sherry Bomb. Canada as a whole has some really incredible distilleries popping up, doing some really cool things. And Vancouver Island is one of the leaders in some of the Canadian spirit whiskeys that are popping up. I obviously last time I was talking about Shelter Point, but Macaloni's, if you ever see this on the shelf, definitely worth picking up. It's not overly priced like so much whiskey nowadays is. It's a Canadian spirit. They're doing incredible things. Local Victoria. Definitely check them out if you're ever on the island.
Well, I am on the island a bit, and I've seen that on the shelves. I've never tried it, but I will definitely pick some up next time I see it. For me, just want to talk about what's going on in the world of Pete. Well, this is going to be my last episode for a few weeks here. I am hitting the road on Tuesday to go on a wacky wild 4-week adventure down in South America. I haven't done a trip like this for a while. As you guys probably know, I travel a lot. This is going to be 2 new countries for me, getting Peru and Bolivia under the belt. I haven't been to South America in almost 17 years. So it's kind of a part of the world that I haven't explored a lot. And I've kind of been doing this as I'm trying to do this as a little bit of a throwback to some of my early trips, not organized too much. I'm not going to turn my data on. I'm not going to have the phone going, using the guidebooks, just trying to kind of fly by the seat of my pants a bit and just kind of like really get back to that elements of what made me fall in love in my early days of travel through like Southeast Asia and Australia and whatnot. So I'm going to miss recording. I'm going to try and catch Canucks games via streams whenever I can. But Tuesday, I have a red-eye flight out of here, and I'll be gone for a few weeks. So while I'm away, I need Canucks Twitter to keep the shorty with the 420 calls going. I would really appreciate that. Brendan, what do you got?
I see, like, it's hard for me not to talk about death when people that, actors and people that I enjoy keep passing away. I mean, it was Andre Brower a couple weeks ago, and this past week it was Tom Wilkinson. But, I mean, I think everybody who's watched movies in the last 20 years know him from something, whether it's Batman Begins, The Patriot he was in. For me, it was Michael Clayton, which is one of my favorite movies. And he passed away at the age of 75 years old. Obviously lived a decently long enough life, but still, 75 seems a little too young. Um, Great actor, one of those just fantastic character actors. And if you haven't seen Michael Clayton before, I really urge you to go see it. It to me is one of the best thrillers of the last 25 years. It's just so well done, and he's so good in it. And yeah, I mean, it's just again another actor that I really enjoy leaves us, but thankfully he leaves a catalog of work that will continue to enjoy long after he's gone.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. That's season 5, episode 13, episode 159 overall, just about in the books. And you know what, guys? Like, we just did a full episode, and I don't even think we mentioned how the Canucks are currently first in the Western Conference. I mean, maybe someone said it in there, but
One
with
step at
everything
a
going on,
time, man.
I
One
know
step
it,
at
but
a
it's
time.
just it's fun.
Oh,
I
yeah.
joked about this before that I used to when we were doing the podcast, I'd have to keep Cap Friendly open, and I'd just be like, I barely looked at that this year. It's fantastic. It's fun being a fan this year. It's going to be fun following this team from afar, and I'm glad to get in to watch a few more games before I go here. Guys, any final thoughts here before we sign off?
Well, have a great trip.
Thank you.
Enjoy yourself. Be safe. And yeah, it's just sit back and enjoy what this team's doing, and hopefully, I mean, I don't see why the ride isn't sustainable. Maybe not to the extent that it is, where I mean, they're 24-10-3. So maybe not to that extent, but they don't have to make the playoffs. They don't have to be that good. So I always just hope this ride continues. And by the time we hit April in a couple of months, we're looking at even more hockey, but enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just gonna say, Pete, if anyone ever made a parody account of you, it would be like your tagline would be "loves to travel and tell you about it." Huh?
I like it.
Anyways,
I like it.
yeah. No,
Hey,
have a safe trip.
It's one of my loves, man. Yeah,
No,
I'll
I know, but
give me a
just 'cause
couple beers and
Javo's-
I'll regale you with
'cause
tales.
Brendan's it was loves to work out and tell you about it, so I thought that was a nice
Yeah,
little
I
dig
like
there.
that. I
If
like
that's
that.
if that's the worst thing that somebody has to say about me, I mean, God, I must be doing okay.
Yeah.
No, of course, and like you said, flattery. It's completely
Yes.
flattery.
Yes.
Also, Pete, the GM of Montreal, he's going to be in Peru around the same time as you are. So it'd be amazing if you guys randomly ran into each other, not really knowing who each other are. But anyways, yeah, Canucks. Obviously, I'm looking forward to this road trip, and tomorrow they start off against the St. Louis Blues, and yeah.
Yeah. And folks, that's not the GM of the Montreal Canadiens. That's
what
place
I
of
was
employment.
thinking.
Just to
I was like, what the fuck
just to
is he
clarify
doing
that.
in Peru?
Yeah, scouting. I mean,
And
interesting.
how would I know that?
Yeah. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on here. Folks, once again on Twitter, I'm at Pete_Gas. That account may be quieter than usual for a little while here, but what will not be quiet is the Canucks Speakeasy outro playlist that you can find on both Apple and Spotify. I will be listening to that a heck of a lot. I encourage you guys to do the same. Lots of great tunes on there.
You can give me a follow on Twitter at Doug Then. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Canucks Speak.
And I'm Jabo_Vancouver, JABO. I don't care where I am. My Twitter account will never be silent, ever. And obviously, we're also on YouTube, so hit the subscribe button, please.
As always, thanks for listening.
Hasta luego.